it's just such a different world than where we were 10 years ago on data protection.
39% of companies sort of got compromised from any sort of breach in the last 1 year. Public cloud isn't a technology by itself. It's a business model shift.
Shifting towards that model where customers only pay for what they use.
It's the operational gap between cybersecurity and data protection. Druva today offers a data security solution to enterprises across the globe. You're not selling your solution to customer. You're selling the customer a better version of their own visions. It all comes down to the Amazon philosophy of like obsessive nature of customers' understanding.
Hey everyone, welcome to SaaS SCIONS, brought to you by AWS and Business Insider India. Today we have Jaspreet Singh here with us today, founder and CEO of Druva. My name is Paul Megan. I lead product management for S3 and Glacier in AWS. I'm looking forward to a great conversation today. How are you doing, Jaspreet?
Paul, good to see you again. Good to meet again. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me here.
So Druva has a super interesting history over the years. I mean, we've been working together for a number of years to deliver, best-in-class data protection across thousands of customers. I just think you guys have just an incredible history and interesting company. Do you want to just give us a quick little introduction into who you are and kind of where how Druva started and what the journey has been like so far?
Absolutely appreciate that. I could do that. Druva today offers a data security solution to enterprises across the globe. The history of the company started off as Genesis from Pune in India. A few early founders and early team members came from Veritas actually, with the idea to build data protection, make it easier, simpler, better for the world. As you could see, the world was changing rapidly from going outside of data center into edges in the public cloud. At the same time, threats in the horizons were increasing in nature, right? So we started a company actually as a software company to build software where people could deploy to back up data dominantly outside the data center. And then, as we raise funding, the first investor being Sequoia Capital, we actually realized that this is a pretty substantially large TAM, and the customers are actually finding it much, much difficult from managing data as it leaves data center going into public cloud. I happened to meet actually Werner Vogel back in 2011. That was a very foundational meeting where we really realized that, look, we could build a big business selling software and compete with many other players in the market, but building a cloud business here could be interesting and something which could set a different path altogether. So, I still remember Werner on a napkin drawing out this whole vision for enterprise readiness for public cloud, and I think how would S3 scale, how compute will scale, and how other things will scale. And we clearly could understand that building a business on top of public cloud, serving customers, could not only make the data management, data production incredibly easy, but also accessible and far more secure to the enterprises, right? So that's how we set off a new journey in 2013. I managed to raise more money, move to the Bay Area, establish the company out of the Bay Area, and build a cloud company. So we had to almost let go our customers at revenue base, build on a software basis, and pivot to a cloud-like model. And sort of here we are after many, many years, after like 11 years of building that business model, of now serving 6,000 customers across the landscape of the enterprise, across the globe, with a focus on securing and protecting data across public cloud, on-premises, edge location, all over the world.
Incredible. The way that you guys were able to transition from a software company to a true born in the cloud company so quickly is just like an awesome achievement. Like what was that time like as you guys were making that transition?
It seemed like a simple transition from outside. Internally, I think we were like swimming under the water, the paddling under the water to try to make things work. I think if you think about a storage subsystem, which you are very familiar with, any storage subsystem, any storage product or any data protection product takes many, many, many years to sort of mature, because there's, if you lose one single bit, it's permanent in nature, right? It's not like you could reproduce it or recreate it, right? So we were rebuilding the entire foundation. The last 30 years of data protection, from the inception of Veritas all the way to the newer players, the foundation of data protection is always grounded in a set of hardware or infrastructure the customer has to produce. In fact, they had to sometimes buy over 7 different pieces of hardware from multiple vendors to build this offering together, right? What we now call a DIY, do-it-yourself offering, right? So reinventing this on a public cloud where you don't have the same paradigms of compute, storage, um, as they exist on premises. They're different and they're better. So recreating that took us a lot of time, but also taught us a lot of interesting skills. And how could this, problem be solved far more efficiently, far more securely, in a way that the quality of service is very different for every enterprise. And also, we learned a very incredible lesson that public cloud isn't a technology by itself. It is far beyond that. It's a business model shift where a customer who was used to buying, set of softwares on premises is now wants to buy a set of outcomes on a predictable price point across the globe. And that's the beauty of cloud. We had to build towards it. And technology was one thing, but the business model shift, the sales pitch shift, the entire business shift around it was very foundational, and also taught us that this could be a long-standing advantage if built well for the customers.
Yeah, shifting towards that model where customers only pay for what they use, right? Where it really is a different way of thinking about the technology business, both for the vendor and for customers, right? It's really it's it's bigger. It's a bigger deal than you think when you're just sort of sketching out what the product would look like. It's pretty interesting. You mentioned security there. I mean, at AWS, and I know you guys share this. Security is the most important thing that we do, and it always will be. How do you think about the security paradigm, and as you were making this shift from selling software to a wholly owned software as a service solution for customers?
It's a great question. And I think there are two parts to the answer. The first part being, how do we think about securing ourselves? Because we have to be secure to solve this as a service for the customers as we hold their data into our cloud. A second is, what are the security outcomes you can deliver to the customer as their journey evolves to be more secure, right? As we all know, like IDC had a statistic last year that almost, I think 39% of companies sort of got compromised from any sort of breach in the last 1 year, and almost half of them lost some bit of the data, right? So ransomware attacks or malware attacks or any vulnerability exploitation is getting more and more common. So security, at least from a point of view of securing Druva's premises, was a mind shift change to think about everything from hiring, recruiting, onboarding, training. How do we write code? How do we ship code? How do we service customer? What do we know about them? To have a sort of security mindset in the entire supply chain of building and delivering outcomes. And that was a big transformational change over the years for Druva to be doing that. And as a result of it, we invested deeply into multiple certification, multiple compliances, regulations, which would make sure we comply with the likes of, for a set of operations which are true to a different country or different industry, and overall makes Druva a very secure platform, right? The most secure platform as we think about today for data protection. Now, shifting gears to security as an outcome for enterprises, for our customers. If we think about last 30 years of security, cybersecurity, there are more and more have been an increased amount of investment in what we would call a perimeter-based security to make sure networks are secured, vulnerability management is done well, or you have endpoint security. But if the biggest fundamental risk for enterprises tends to be in the data, enterprises are not investing sufficiently enough yet to think about inside-out security, to think about securing their core digital assets, especially as they think about internet-enabled or a SaaS-enabled company in the future, right? And that's where Druva comes into picture to see what threats are likely to be applicable to data, and how do we think about from a zero trust principles securing data, even though parameter may be 100% secure. We all know vulnerabilities are exploited, actors get in. So how do we make sure even though parameter may be secure, how data can be safeguarded by understanding its nature, understanding its movement, understanding its changes appropriately, and taking actions to make sure we can secure against multitude of threats against data.
This is where I just love working with you guys. I mean, we spent a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time with your team, and you guys have developed this sort of sophisticated understanding of the threat landscape as it's evolved over the course of the last number of years, right? Like this ransomware threat that customers face is just evolved so quickly. You know what I mean? And you guys are just so good at being on top of that and understanding sort of what what the real life day-to-day managing that threat looks like for customers, and we spend a lot of time thinking about securing the data within AWS as well, and the way that you guys have this pedigree of having secured so many customer endpoints over the years, just the combination of the two organizations, I think, has just been really great in terms of what we've been able to deliver together for customers. I'd love to just get your perspective on just how ransomware has evolved over the last few years and how you guys think about keeping up with that, and just what your experience is as that is just sort of, it's just such a fast evolving space that you guys have managed to stay on top of.
Absolutely. It's a pretty interesting subject, and we could spend hours on the subject. And before that, yes, we thoroughly enjoy the secure by design principles of AWS, which we use internally to make sure every single element of service we use have right level of redundancy, right level of resiliency, and right level of security, which we depend upon to make sure our entire service is very much secure, right? So it's about choosing the right stack, the right partners all the way across to make sure what you offer is secure, right? Now coming to ransomware, right? If you look at the anatomy of ransomware, if you look at like what ransomware truly, or a malware which wants to destroy data truly is, right? There are roughly 4 to 5 stages of evolution or an attack, right? What's called a kill chain of a malware, right? There is some sort of research or reconnaissance, which sort of, a weaponization where a threat actor as a first stage is wants to understand more and more about the organization they want to penetrate. The second stage tends to be some sort of an exploit where they get hold of a vulnerability, of a permissioning, of an unmanaged instance, unmanaged server, which they exploit to sort of enter the account. And this is where majority of security investments go into. But we all understand that a breach or an exploit like this is a race condition. It could happen anywhere to anyone on one unmanaged service. And once it happens, the intruder is an insider now, right? So third stage is pretty critical. Third stage is all about command and control, gestation. They could live in your systems unnoticed for months, days, or years, trying to establish a permanent foothold of going wide into the organization and seeing how many assets can they permanently get a hold of. So they have a command and control over the years or some time to really infect or destroy what they would want to in the final target, right? The final stage is an attack where they would understand a system, a data, a supply chain event to compromise. A final compromise happens, and which sort of breaks the whole process for an enterprise. So now, and it puts it in perspective, and then now they want to chase and solve it, right? But when an enterprise finally wants to attack the final stage of a malware exposing itself and destroying data, destroying potentially backups, a lot has happened. The threat actor has weaponized itself, has exploited vulnerability, made many vulnerabilities, established variety of command and controls, right? And a simple, to give an example of what people sometimes don't put in perspective, a vulnerability could be a simple server, a web server, which had an unpatched system being exploited, and that's not unthinkable. But the central stage is where it gets very, very interesting, right? And how they've been using their tactics to set up command and control, right? By hiding themselves in ticketing systems, by using a seamless binaries like ftp.exe, whatever, like any in scheme of things which are completely normal, but because of the attack vector, because of the understanding of the system and the weaponization they went through, these tactics are very, very critical to happen to this particular organization at this particular time, right? So the Druva comes into picture because while there's a lot of investment to make sure the exploit doesn't happen, there's not much investment in enterprise to understand how a gestation, command and control, propagation may happen across enterprise. Us having a copy of data from a backup and recovery perspective, from a data protection perspective, becomes a humongously better tool for understanding, a depth of an attack, a gestation of an attack, like which systems were impacted, how did data react to it, what binaries we use, what toolkit for use, is all stored within those backup systems, which becomes an incredibly good tool for a security analyst, for an incident responder to look at systems, understand impact, and understand how to scope it, how to contain it, how to avoid reinfection, how to avoid a really good job of forensics and notification appropriately to the right custodian. So a lot can happen as if you put the data you've been collecting about the organization to a good use against the malware.
Such a sophisticated answer. You know what I mean? And like that's what I love about working with you guys on this topic, right? Is that it's easy to talk about ransomware and data protection at a surface level. You know what I mean? It seems like it's such a simple subject, right? Especially if you have a dated understanding of how data protection works, right? I'm just going to take a copy of this important data and put it over there in case I need it later. But like best of breed technology in this space just has to have that sort of sophisticated awareness of, what's going on, like you said, sort of across the board, like what are the threat vectors? How does it get in? How does it stay in? How is it triggered later? Right? It's just such a different world than where we were 10 years ago on data protection. It's completely night and day, right?
It's very different. The biggest gap today in enterprise isn't a software gap anymore for security. It's the operational gap between data security or cybersecurity and data protection. And how do I make sure people who are monitoring systems at the surface level and who those are responsible for recovery, remediation, are talking to each other in a common language, understand the threats similarly, understand the kill chain similarly, and can solve the stuff in the middle appropriately, which has been a big challenge for enterprises so far.
And your guys' approach, what's so cool about it is that, I mean, and we can certainly, we share a similar philosophy. It's like that deep understanding gives you the ability to work backwards from, the real customer problems that, that customers have in order to overcome these challenges. Right. And I just think that like that ability to dive deep, just across, whenever I talk to anyone from your organization, they're able to do that. Right. And that's just really cool and refreshing for a tech vendor to have that deep understanding of the customer problems that they're working backwards from. It's just really cool.
It comes down to the customer empathy or customer obsession, as AWS also talks about. Like, we realize that there's plenty of good research customer security vendors have done to understand how a vulnerability may be exploited, but there's not good fundamental understanding on how it actually takes place within an organization, how it goes deep, how it goes wide, how it spreads, how a gestation period happens. So we invested time and effort and research to understanding this part of the kill chain and helping the customers out. And it's all comes down to the Amazon philosophy of like obsessive nature of customers understanding.
Yeah. So far, just to recap the ground we've covered so far, it's all those folks out there who want to be a SaaS scion in the future. We talked about like responding to to sort of like technology waves and pivoting a business model to really be in the right place at the right time and then diving deep into that technology space and deeply understanding customers in order to be solving the right problems. I mean, I think you guys have done just amazing on that. Another aspect that we focus on a lot, and I'd love to get your perspective on, is like, we often say that our goal operationally is to be indistinguishable from perfect, right? And so like you can have the right business model, you can be solving the right problems, but if your product isn't rock solid, and you're not executing on the fundamentals, is how we focus on. We talk about that. You're not going to deliver for customers. So I'd just love to get your, before we pivot off and talk a little bit about the future and Gen AI and all that exciting stuff. I'd love to get your perspective on kind of the how you think about driving a large talented engineering organization within Druva, such that you guys are able to just day after day execute on reliability and quality and all that stuff.
That's a great point. That's a very, very good question. I think I would also say to many people trying to understand to build scalable companies that inception of a company or the founding of a company, the initial days of success is a lot of luck. It's a lot of the timing is something which you cannot control, right? But what you can control is when the timing happens to be in your favor, you are disciplined to be ready, disciplined to put enough time, put enough focus to build the right product, listen to customers. That's in your control. Many things what happened to Druva early on, happened to understand AWS model, happened to time the market for data prediction well, was sheer luck. But from there on, I completely agree with Paul on the emphasis the tech founders must have on building an incredible good product. I still believe tech founders don't spend enough time with the product, right? They often, distribution was challenging, I would say 10, 15 years ago, right? It was all about distribution. The better distribution used to win, hands down, across the board, because distribution was very difficult, especially in the enterprise segment. It was very difficult, right? With Amazon Marketplace, with app stores, with internet, with PLG, with demand gen, distribution is getting easier, will get a lot more easier, right? So better product, it was all about tell me what you're doing 5 years ago. Now show me the product, right? Better product, better engineered product, reliable product, demoable product, installable product, operating product, right? How do you truly fill? Because what you're not selling a customer is you're not selling your solution to customer. You're selling the customer a better version of their own vision, of their own solution, right? So if you think about that perspective, what you're building has to fit into their vision, their solution of the future, right? So a really well-rounded product which fits in their vision. And if you deliver it well, distribution is going to be less and less challenging in the future, but an incredibly good product will still be extremely important as we go around and scaling.
That's great insight. What are you, I mean, I'm sure as a CEO, you spend a lot of time with C-level, C-level executives at your customers and at prospects, and you must spend a lot of time in those circles. I just would be interested to hear sort of what you're hearing from executives right now. In terms of, I love the way you put it about helping customers to execute on their vision for where they want to take their businesses. Are you hearing themes, or what are you generally hearing from those execs that you're dealing with now?
Absolutely. So if you think about the Fortune 500 companies, right? There are only 47 tech-enabled companies on that list, right? Or predominantly tech companies in that list. I misuse the word tech-enabled, right? But a whole share of others want to be tech-enabled, right? At the genesis of this entire journey from automobile manufacturer becoming a Tesla, or a United Airlines trying to reinvent itself on internet, or Domino's Pizza trying to deliver pizzas in 30 minutes as an internet company. The genesis of the next 450 companies, which are not born in the tech companies, is how do we get on the internet? How do we get on SaaS eventually, right? Or subscription model eventually. That journey is founded in principles of digitalization of their core services being delivered online. To deliver those traditional services, these 450 companies must rethink their services, their delivery of services, their data, right? As it rethink their entire data equation, the three fundamental things everybody is worried about now. One is still at the core of it is digitalization of services. How do I get to cloud? How do we get to subscription eventually? Right. Number one. Number two, how do I do it securely? Security is becoming a major concern, as you know, and the security threats across the board. It doesn't have to be only malware. Many companies who are, let's say, in public sector or public sector facing, the big threat is a process gap, which should be a privacy or a legal gap, right? So there are many threats across the board, which is still a lot of customers are focused on. Number two, right? Number three, I think comes to be Gen AI. Everybody is very curious about this new trend for AI, and how generative nature of it could truly help them transform and leapfrog this entire initiative, right? So that's very interesting. I would say these three things are happening in the customers.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about that last one a little bit. At AWS, we're very focused on helping customers and businesses to innovate using generative AI. We've been working together on this for a long time. I think Druva was out in front on experimenting and then building Gen AI into the product. And you have Gen AI capabilities there today. I'd love to get your perspective on where you're at, and then we can talk a little bit about where you think we're all going with this.
Yeah, first of all, like big fan of what AWS is doing on Gen AI. Like we are big users of it. I love the last release. If I don't know if anybody noticed, like, in Gen AI, prompt engineering was a thing. Like you thought you would hire engineers for prompt engineering. The latest release, the API release by AWS, almost solves for prompt engineering by you can write to an API, it can choose a right prompt and the right model for that question. That's the nature of cloud you need, right? The nature of abstraction is going to come in the market where, you'll be building not to a single model, you'll be building to a set of models, with each of them having own individual capabilities and cost metrics and stuff like that, right? So that's the beauty of using the right cloud. Now, from Gen AI, from a provider like Druva, there are like two or three core areas of focus. One tends to be pretty common for all enterprise. Can I get my knowledge workers, be it support engineers, customer-facing engineers, internal engineers, or anyone, a knowledge worker, into a Gen AI-like system so their work could be faster, cheaper, better, and you could help the customer needs better, right? And that involves getting your internal processes, getting your internal documentation, getting whatever internal work culture into a Gen AI-like structure, right? That's what Druva has done. We launched our chatbot for customers called Druva Assist, which can not only answer questions about the utilization of product, but also can do lightweight troubleshooting, right? You could say, hey, tell me more about why this error is happening in my system, not a generic issue on any customer, but why is happening to me, right? So very interesting way to sort of troubleshoot and sort of do a basic testing of the customer scenarios and answer questions, right? The second tends to be in the elements of how do I deeply understand customers from explainability, better operability, better troubleshooting perspective. Can AI understand my natures better? A very fundamental thing in backup and recovery scheduling. Why do we have to schedule something? The nature of this job to Gen AI should not be to teach them how to use backups or how to use security, but in the sense, teach them the customer problem and let them come up with a better solution. A better solution, which is much more better for customer, more explainable, more operable from the AI to the customer, right? So that's the second area of effort we're putting into teaching the AI models a lot about our APIs, our utilization, the customer, the problem, to see if there could be better answers, simpler answers, faster answers given by an AI model, right? The third one is pretty interesting, and we are actually pretty close to announcing something there as well, where as you talked about the complexity of a malware kill chain, of the entire complexity of data security, a customer or a security analyst in specific has to deal with thousands of parameters of what could happen to data, right? It could get encrypted, it could get mutated, it could get deleted, it could get breached, right? Exploring that relationship between people, processes, data tends to be very, very complex, right? I want to know what Paul Megan did to his email yesterday. Oh, by the way, how many of them were about Druva? And oh, by the way, how many of them were about this particular insider trading regulation, right? So you tend to have a understanding of a matter which could have a complex relationship. So far has been done by very, very complex querying languages, complex set of UIs. And now we're trying to get GenAI to teach them how to explore a graph entity called data and actually deliver answers the customer needs. A customer needs a simpler answer saying, tell me who stole my data in the last 7 days. And it could suggest saying, I might look in so and so location to build a hypothesis, test with you, and then come back to seek more data, test those with you, and recursively trying to find an answer for the customer, right? So that's the power of exposing a generative capabilities of an AI to magnitude of data which Druva has, and the quality and quantity of data Druva has to deliver very specific outcomes which are hard to predict, very specific black swan events which are hard to put, they have no historical significance, but could be catastrophic for an enterprise go forward basis.
Fascinating. Well, I mean, what I love about what you just said is that, you kind of have like these three separate bets, right? Of like making yourself better, like making it easy for customers to use your product, and then a whole like blue sky aspect of using Gen AI to really like reason about the complexity that is the anatomy of a ransomware attack. And we very much agree with you that it's not going to be like one size fits all, one model for every single use case. You know what I mean? And so it's great to see Druva sort of taking advantage of some of some of those capabilities within AWS to kind of like use the right tool for the right job in the right context. That's really cool.
Have you found different models which work better for embedding? Different models are better for reasoning. Different models are better for simple language skills, cheapen up language skills. So the beauty of using multi-model approach is to get and not to worry about prompt engineering or not to worry about the limitation or cost aspect of a single model to deliver the right outcome for the customer.
Yep, fascinating. Well, we're almost out of time, but before I let you go, I would love to just hear, just as a founder, to get your perspective on, the spaces that you believe that there's still innovation waiting to be unlocked, and any advice you'd give, those thousands of SaaS companies in India who are looking to kind of follow in your footsteps and go take on the world like Druva has.
If you look at as I said, look at the list of Fortune 500 companies, less than 47, last I counted, were born in tech or sort of prominent tech companies. I believe less than 15 are SaaS companies, right? So if a founder, the opportunity to pick a Fortune 500 name and see how the business model will get disrupted by internet, by internet-enabled services, by subscription models, and now SaaS, which are sort of trend building on each other, is an opportunity by itself, right? Deeply understanding each company's business is a great time to be innovating as an entrepreneur, right? And the beauty of public cloud and beauty of even mobile and AI, it's a very, very level playing field. When I used to work as an engineer in Veritas, my counterpart in the US had far better resources, infrastructure, everything than I ever had to build what I was doing. But now, with the advent of cloud, with mobile, with AI, it's a globally level playing field, which really sparks the innovation for the customer. For the best answers come from the best people across the globe, doesn't matter where they're located. And that creates a very interesting race for innovation across the globe to power the right solutions, right? So as a founder, I would again say like timing is everything, and it's often not in your control to reach the right solution at the right time, but the discipline, the foundation to be ready, the sheer grit and hard work is completely in your control to put in to make the product ready for the right time.
That's great. I mean, you guys really do have an inspiring story. You just like, I mean, you've helped so many customers on their worst days and prevented so many worse days, even worse days than that. You can't even count it. So Anyway, Jaspreet, as always, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Super insightful conversation. And thanks again.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate your time.